But are you ready for our first keynote speaker?
Yeah.
Good. He's a Swedish guy and comes from Stockholm School of Economics, but he could be a typical Finnish man because he will talk about emotions. Yeah. Let's give a warm welcome to Professor Magnus Söderlund.
So, hello. I'm from Stockholm School of Economics in Stockholm, in Sweden, but I also serve as a kind of part-time researcher at Hanken, so I come here to Finland every now and then. The topic for this seminar is really humor in business. In my mind, the important thing about humor is really the effects. So what I would like to do is to focus on the effects. And again, in my mind, a main type of effect has to do with joy. So that will be my focus. And my argument is really that humor and some other things that are occurring in marketing settings and in organizations has the potential to create joy, and joy in turn has the potential to create all sorts of interesting effects. So you will hear a lot about humor during the other presentations. So my focus will be on some other things related to marketing that are likely to produce humor too. And my focus as a marketing person will be on customers' joy. Of course, there could be other types of actors who are subject to joy in a setting like this, in a business setting, such as organizational members, of course, but even suppliers and all sorts of stakeholders. But my focus will be on customers. So what I would like to do is to begin by talking a little bit about joy itself, and then turn to some marketing activities with the potential of producing joy. But if we begin with joy, then we need to put it in an emotional framework, because joy is supposed to be one of the fundamental emotions. And what you see here is one way of organizing emotional categories. There is some debate among researchers what an emotion really is and which the basic emotions are, but what you see here is a kind of relative consensus image of what joy is supposed to be. And then the idea is that there are two dimensions. The first one has to do with how it feels in terms of negative and positive values. And as we all know, different types of emotions feel differently when it comes to positive and negative things. Joy is up here, so it is supposed to be positive according to researchers, and I think that sort of corresponds pretty well with everyday life too. But in order to get more precision, researchers have added another dimension which has to do with arousal. And arousal has to do with, let's call it the physical energy in the body. It's physiological things such as heart rate and breathing frequency and things like this. So by adding this second dimension, we get some more precision in what joy is supposed to feel like in relation to several other emotions. So joy will be the focus, but I will also like to talk a little bit about some general characteristics of emotions from a marketing point of view, given that you as a marketer might be interested in creating all sorts of emotional reactions among customers. So what are the main characteristics of emotions from a marketing point of view? One of them has to do with the fact that it is pretty easy to evoke emotions. Good if you're a marketer, because it's a kind of cost-efficient reaction, and as we will see, joy can be evoked very easily with very small things. And how do researchers know this? They know it because they have been so much research related to emotions, and what we do know as researchers is that human faces are very likely to be A, recognized easily, and 2, read easily in the sense that it is very easy for an observer who looks at another person to distinguish what kind of emotional state this other person is in. So a typical approach for researchers is to show pictures of strangers like this for participants in a study, but the participants can only look at each of these pictures for a very brief period in time, such as less than a second. And then the task is for them to see if they can identify what kind of emotion this person has which they are looking at them. And it turns out that this task is pretty easy for most normal human beings. We need very little time to identify this emotion. And then the interesting thing as a kind of byproduct is that you easily get affected by the other person's emotion, even though if it's only a stranger on a picture. And the idea is that emotions are contagious. You get somehow the emotion of the other person. Is like a social virus. So let's see if this works on you guys. I'm now going to show you one face, but you're going to see it just for a very brief period in time. Let's see if you recognize what kind of emotion this person is in. Are you ready? What would you say about that person's emotional state? Happy or joyful, to align a little bit to our emotional theme. So that was pretty easy, but if theory works as it is supposed to work, you will also feel a little bit more of joy yourself, given that emotions are contagious. Okay, that's very good for marketers if we can evoke emotions easily. It's even better if we can have a huge sort of pool of things that we can show to customers in order to evoke emotions. And the other point is really interesting, the second one, because it shows that emotionally charged marketing can be very flexible. So think about it like this. You are this bullfighter and you are facing the bull. Then it's pretty intuitive that you will feel all sorts of emotions. This is a kind of threatening situation. But let's change the perspective. You are no longer the bullfighter, you are now in the audience. You are watching this bullfighter. It's a safe place. You don't need to worry about anything. But still, it is very likely that you will feel all sorts of emotions in this situation. And to take it even further, let's say you are reading a novel, a fictional novel. You know that the story about the bullfighter is just made up by some author. This has never happened. It's just in the imagination of the author. Still, it's easy to get absorbed in the story and feel all sorts of emotions. Very good from a marketing point of view, because you can use even fictional stuff in order to evoke emotions. This aspect has to do with the fact that most people cannot so easily control their emotions, meaning that if you end up in some emotional state, it's kind of interruptive in the sense that all sorts of other activities that may go on in your mind are supposed to be interrupted. Again, something which is pretty useful for a marketer, because what you want is really full attention from customers who you are trying to impress with various things. Researchers have some issues with respect to the duration of emotions, and the contemporary idea is basically that they have short duration, and you are in this or that emotional state only for a very brief period, like a minute or something like that. If it goes on longer, then it's no longer an emotion, then it's some sort of mood which can go on for several days or several weeks. And this is not so good, of course, from a marketer's point of view, because what you want to do is to make lasting impressions on people. So here is perhaps the backside if your marketing is aimed for emotions. But on the other hand, we can easily remember our emotions, so it's pretty easy to come back and recall and actually really relive the emotions that we felt at some previous point in time. So maybe the duration is not so short after all, given that these emotions can come back again and again and again. What else? Typically, emotions are associated with all sorts of things happening in the body, such as breathing frequency and heart rate and things like this, adding to the memory potential of emotions. So most people would testify that if they have been in a very strong emotional state, they will remember it pretty easily because the body memory, so to say, have memorized how it felt in various parts of the body. And perhaps the most important thing from a marketer's point of view, these emotions are not supposed just to cease in terms of causal impact when they are over. They are supposed to lead further on to other reactions. And from a communication point of view, this is basically what many researchers think today. You expose customers to some sort of emotionally charged marketing stuff, whatever it is, advertising or store environments or interactions with store people. This is supposed to lead to an emotional reaction, so it's a kind of primitive reaction. It is supposed to come before many other things. But if the process had ceased here, I don't think so many marketers would have been interested. But it is not supposed to stop. It is supposed to lead further on to all sorts of reactions which marketers are typically interested in, at least in a communication context, such as the customer's reactions to the ad itself, towards the advertised brands, purchase intentions, and then real behavior, which will in the end have some impact on revenues and costs in the firm. That's the idea. So the idea is really that emotions, when customers experience them, will have an impact on other things following later on in a chain like this. Okay, in order to get ourselves a little bit more familiar with different emotions before we focus more on joy, I'm going to say something about a very ambitious research project in Florida, where some researchers have created a huge library of images. It's at the moment consisting of more than 1,000 images of all sorts of things existing on this planet. And the idea is to show participants one image at a time to see what kind of reaction this image is creating in terms of emotions, in order to get some sort of emotional grammar. What is creating this or that emotion? So this is the Florida Image Library. And these guys have turned my matrix the other way around, but it's the same idea. Each photograph or image is supposed to evoke some specific emotion. And by looking at those images, we may get a better feeling for what is creating what when it comes to emotions. So if we return to this one, and let's say that we would like to, of some reason, as marketers, expose people to something which makes them ending up here. Very negative and very high level of arousal. Why would we like to do this as marketers? Probably because we would like to claim that given that you buy our fantastic product, you will be relieved out of this very negative state. So, if you think about it in general terms, what do you think on this planet is likely to produce emotions making people end up here?
Snakes.
Snakes could be one thing, definitely.
Dead body.
Say again?
Dead body.
Dead body. We are beginning now to approach really serious things. In the library, it was pictures like this, and obviously they are negatively charged and they can create all sorts of stress. Let's say now we want our customers to end up in this state, presumably again because we want to claim that our fantastic product will remove this less exciting state. What do you think on this planet will put people in that particular emotional state? It's almost as you are falling asleep and it is very negative.
Cleaning.
Cleaning, very good. Actually, pictures like this created this reaction. Dirty things, graveyards, garbage, things like this. Okay, as you know, as business people, satisfaction has really become a dominant state of mind when it comes to what marketers would like to do with customers. So let's say now we want to create some feeling of satisfaction. What do you think on this planet would do the job best? What kind of images would we show? It's positive, but it's not that exciting really.
Beaches.
Say again?
Beaches and palm trees.
Yes.
Pictures of meals.
Meals. I would say that that is a wrong answer. Now we will see later on where meals end up. Anyway, clouds, mushroom, cows produced feelings of satisfaction. And from a business point of view, I must really question if this is the wisest practice. We say that we want our customers to be satisfied. That's so good because then they are loyal and they produce a lot of word of mouth and things like this. But is that the most exciting thing we can do in marketing, to create feelings of clouds, mushrooms and cows? I'm not so sure that this is the wisest of practices. So given this matrix, why did marketers choose this one out of all the possible ones? I think it has to do with the original idea of marketing is dating back to the 1950s, basically saying that what you as a good marketer is supposed to do is to satisfy people's needs. And given that this is an important objective for marketers, it becomes kind of natural to focus on satisfaction. Turning to joy, what do you think on this planet would make people feel joyful?
Playing kids.
Say again?
Playing children.
Playing children could be one activity.
Animals.
Anything else?
Animals.
Animals, all sorts of animals or just some sort of animals?
Kittens. Puppies. Games.
Nice little kittens perhaps. In the library there were things like this. Those joyful occasions, social occasions where people meet and have a nice time. Meals and up here actually. So it is a kind of consistent result from many studies that people really associate meals with some sort of joyful situation. We feel very good when we are eating, particularly if we are eating together with other persons. Money also ended up in this position, suggesting that life has become pretty materialistic. Before we move on, let's say now, just for the sake of it, we want something more than joy. We want to put our customers up here. It should be a really positive emotion, and it should be full of energy, more than what joy is likely to produce. What do you think on this planet would create such emotions?
Winning.
Swimming?
No, winning.
Winning, yes. In the image library there were things like those that I'm going to show you now, and I hope you're not going to report me for showing certain types of pictures, but this was actually in the library. Situations like this, but not only this, also situations like this. And as we know, quite a number of marketers are using themes or images or situations like this when they are trying to promote their brand. So somehow there seems to be some implicit idea that if you expose your brand together or within a situation like this, maybe this will rub off on the brand and create strong positive feelings among customers. Incidentally, those guys who are creating the library have taken one further step. They have now done basically the same thing, but with respect to words in the English language. So now there is a list of about 1,000 words which can be plotted in various ways in this matrix. And we don't have time really to look at that in detail, but it seems as if only the word joy, if you expose people to this, would create some sort of joy-like feeling, which is opening up the door for some interesting opportunities in marketing. And if I turn to my own country, some marketers have now begun to use explicitly the word joy rather than satisfaction or any other possible emotional state when they are communicating with customers. And then we end up with things like this. Food joy has become some sort of concept. Driving joy has become another concept. Runner's joy has become another concept, which is used explicitly in communication with customers. So some have sort of taken a step further from satisfaction. It's no longer the satisfied customer that is interesting. It's the joyful customer. Okay, let's begin now. I think I have lost track completely already of time. How much more time do I have? A lot, I hope. 14 fantastic minutes. Yes, very good. Let's now move to those arrows and let's look at some ways in which joy can be evoked. In addition to humor, which you will hear more about later on. So one is to use various smiling persons in marketing communication activities. And this is hardly news for marketers, because if we look at how marketing looks today, at least when it comes to printed ads, it's kind of easy to see that the main trend is to co-expose your brand with some image. Ads like this are containing less and less text. They become more and more image-based. And typically the image that are used depict human beings. And typically they are also smiling. It is as if the world of ads is overpopulated with smiling persons. So we have all seen so many of these every day. In Sweden we call the boats to Finland Finland boats. I know that you guys call them the Sweden boats. Even these guys are promoting their boats or trips or travels with smiling persons. This is an elevator in a hotel in Helsinki. They put one smiling person so that this picture is filling up one wall like this. And sometimes there is use also of not smiling faces, but symbols of smiling faces. So what do we know about this? What I did was to carry out some experiments in which the facial expression of the person was subject to variation. So in a typical experiment like this, one group of people is looking only at one of these. They don't even know that there exists another one. Another group is looking at the other one and they don't even know that another alternative exists. Both groups are asked exactly the same questions afterwards. So it is easy to compare the responses between the groups. A kind of typical straightforward experiment. In this case, it turned out that almost everything that was measured reached higher values when people were looking at the smiling version of the human model. If we focus on the bottom line here, perhaps as the most important thing from a marketing point of view, the attitude towards the brand actually became higher when the model was smiling. It's almost magical. It seems so easy to promote brand attitudes, given that you introduce some sort of smiling person like this. Okay, you see the difference between these two juice packages? What is the difference? This was the subject of another experiment. Again, one group looks only at this one. They don't know that there exists another version. Another group looks only at this one and don't know that there exists another version. In this case, it was brand attitude that was measured afterwards, on a scale ranging from 1 to 10. 1 very poor, 10 very good. And isn't it almost magic what a little smile can do? The difference is not gigantic, but there is a significant difference in there. So let's put a crying person instead of a neutral person and compare to a smiling person. Do you think this would create differences if we are interested in the attitude towards the product? Maybe a case could be made for the crying person. Maybe this would serve as an argument for why this product should be bought. If you're really sad, well, please buy this because it will remove your sadness. But in this case, the smile was winning. So from a marketing communication point of view, when it comes to using images of human beings in ads and other printed activities, it seems as if smiles are actually doing something positive to the customer's reactions from the marketer's point of view. Okay, let's turn to the next arrow. Now we turn to real life meeting between persons, between customers and representatives, such as this. These two are interacting with each other in real life, face-to-face. This is not the digital world, it's the real world. The customer goes into a store or comes to an hotel or travels with an airline or whatever. What we do know is that many firms think that smiles and other activities are useful in this context. So what is becoming more and more common now is that firms are issuing instructions for employees who have a lot of customer contacts. Sometimes it's pretty straightforward. This is McDonald's, hand them their order with a smile. This is from H&M. This is painted on the wall in the personnel area, so no customer sees this in one of the stores, reminding the employees every day and every time they pass about 4 things. Say thank you, smile, say hello, and establish eye contact. In this case, an American chain of hotels have more detailed instructions. This is only point number 1 on a long list of points consisting of 10 major points with all sorts of sub-points. So if you come to a Hilton hotel in Stockholm at Slussen, then pay attention. Do these people with whom you are interacting really smiling? If they're not following their instructions. So many firms are taking this seriously, at least in the sense that they are producing lists like this. I wanted to see how serious this was, so I equipped myself with a hidden camera and I went around posing as a customer, trying to make videos out of what is happening in those face-to-face encounters. And we don't have time to look at those videos, but I made some stills, and when I looked at all this material, it was obvious to me that very few persons were actually smiling, even though they were working in firms in which the instructions are that they should smile. So maybe it's not so easy to produce those smiles. Anyway, this is also something which one can carry out experiments about. In this case, it was a travel agency. One group of customers are interacting with this lady when she has this facial expression. Another group is interacting with the same person and basically the same things are happening. It's only that the facial expression is different. And we measured the customer's level of joy, and indeed it seems as if emotions are contagious in the sense that the smiling version resulted in a slightly higher level of joy. And it seems as if satisfaction was affected in basically the same way. Maybe it was so that joy somehow infected satisfaction, so that satisfaction was boosted by the joy content. Okay, another experiment. People were out flying, they were interacting with this stewardess. She existed in two versions. Exactly the same things happened between the customer and the stewardess. They were interacting 3 times during this flight. And in this case, the joy difference was higher. So it's really customer joy that you see here. That was what was measured. It's not the joy of the stewardess. It's the customer's own joy. So somehow this gives support to the idea that emotions are contagious. In this case, satisfaction was also boosted. But as I said, it was not that easy to spot those smiles when I was walking around posing as a customer. So is it really enough to have a checklist like this? Would that produce a lot of nice positive smiles? I'm not so sure. So here are some advice for you guys who really take those smiles seriously, in the sense that you want all of your employees to smile every time they are encountering a customer. This is what you should do. At least this is what they did, those guys who are taking care of the commuter trains in the Tokyo area. This is how it works. If you work in this organization, you sort of check in the morning in a kind of photo booth where a picture of your face is taken. This picture is based on facial recognition technology, so an algorithm computes the smile potential of your face. It prints out this in color on a piece of paper, and you're supposed to keep this piece of paper in your pocket during the full working day, so that you will be able to check to what extent you are realizing your smile potential. As a reminder of that you should smile more in every encounter. This is what you should have in your companies, right? If you don't like that, maybe you should put up mirrors, which they do in some telemarketing companies, where they never interact on a face-to-face basis. They talk to each other on the telephone. But someone has thought that if we put up a mirror so that the employees can look at themselves in this mirror, then they will presumably see that this is the wrong expression when you are talking to customers. You're supposed to smile even on the telephone, because this smile is likely to do something with your tone of voice or your general attitude when you are interacting with others. Or as they did in China before they became the host of the Olympic Games, they thought it was important that the people working in this organization should smile. So then they submitted them to smiles training by putting chopsticks in their mouth like this. So there are several options if you want more smiles from your employees. To be serious for some seconds, most of us are able to recognize when a smile is not genuine, when it's faked. It's not a smile out of joy, it is a smile out of something else. And then it is not likely that all those effects that I have talked about will materialize. If you Google this, spot the fake smile, you will end up in a little questionnaire showing you 20 brief videos of people who are moving their heads and facial expressions. And for each of them, you are supposed to say if you think the smile is fake or genuine. If you get 20 out of 20 correct answers, then your emotional intelligence is really high. I have done this test. I found that it was not that easy really to spot the fake smiles. But in general, people are supposed to be sensitive to when those smiles are faked. Okay, I still have some minutes, haven't I? 2 minutes, that's incredibly short. Anyway, let's turn to the final arrow and let's take a little detour first. It has become an interesting practice, if you're not interested in joy but satisfaction instead, to carry out research in which you ask only one single question basically, namely, please think about some specific incident in which you became very satisfied. That's it. And then the customer tells a story, and the researcher's task is to organize these stories in order to find some common themes with respect to causes of satisfaction. And this typically generates neat models with things that you have heard 100 times already. If we satisfy the customer's needs, then they become satisfied. If we give them something extra, beyond the expectations, the surprise, then they become satisfied. If we make mistakes, then we should correct them because this can raise satisfaction in the end. These are things many of us have heard already, but as a final thing, let's twist this a little bit. So we're not asking people anymore about satisfaction. We ask them about what made you really joyful and see what happens. What kind of stories do they tell and how can we organize these stories? And when I have done this, I have recognized that it was not so easy to produce neat models with only a few headlines, because there is more complexity obviously in what is making people joyful as opposed to what is making them satisfied. Here is what I have obtained when I have done this, and some things are not that surprising. This one is basically the same as when we try to find out what is making people satisfied. This one surprised me, that so many people said that various good bargains or a low price or finding something extra cheap was a great source of joy. And again, it signaled, at least to me, that people are becoming very materialistic. Is this really such an important source of joy? Well, maybe it is in your life as a customer. This one has to do with feeling a part of a group. I feel some sort of belongingness with others. So if a product has the ability to create this kind of feeling, it seems as if joy might be likely. And then you need to stress other things than what you do perhaps typically, because most firms are so concerned with the relationship between themselves and the product. Here you need to change the perspective and think about the customer's relations with other customers and how a product can boost this. I think I am running out of time, but a few words about this one. It seems as if when you have to wait for a product, you have to long for it, then when you finally obtain it, then it can produce joy. It's kind of interesting because it's in the opposite of what many firms are trying to do today, when they are trying to stress convenience or fastness or easiness. It should not be a long period of longing. You should get your product immediately. Very good, yes indeed, but maybe you will not produce joy to the same extent by doing this. And then, as we will hear more about later, also humor, of course, is one of many sources of joy. And as a very final thing, we have looked at 3 ways of creating joy, but the perhaps most important thing is the end of this model. What is joy likely to do? And it turns out that joy has the ability to produce all the things that satisfaction is supposed to do, if you look at satisfaction as an alternative. But as I have seen in some studies in which I have included both joy and satisfaction, the link between joy and things like this often becomes stronger compared to a satisfaction case. Probably has to do with that this state of mind is more sort of positively charged and more arousing than what satisfaction is. Thank you so much.